business, also we remind you to invest your money into something that will see it grow. So Zabu is a platform that is here for you to invest and grow your money. Invest in bonds and securities by using the USSD code *292#, and that will propel you to at least ideally focus more on building from situation per day. Well, of course, as we continue to look through and strengthen our money and our focus on building strategy, you get to realize that, well, it is ideally something that we should be focusing on today. Now, focusing more on investing and growing your money is something that you should be noting so well. The markets have already opened at 8:15 a.m., so that means your investment journey should quickly start off. Zabu says, my money, my future. These markets will only get closed at 3:15 p.m., so you still have time to open up an account as well as to start your investment today with Zabu. And of course, Zabu is powered by Altex East Africa. Well, besides that, now we head into SMB Insight this morning. And our insight is basically rotating around the growing public concern on the public debt, which has apparently resulted into some cases of corruption, as Uganda has apparently also lost 10 trillion due to corruption cases. And how best does the government have to do to recover this particular economy, and not only that, to at least minimize on the ever-increasing public debt. We have more of this in the SMB Insight this morning.
As a civil society organization, we want them to look at the cost and risks associated with public debt. First of all, the cost of debt, of public debt itself, which we see as a country has continued on an upward trajectory. For instance, interest payments as a percentage of GDP has been rising, and we see that it rose to 3.1 in December 2021 from 2.8 of June in the same year. What does this mean? It means that interest payments are increasing relative to the country's income or to our revenues. They are increasing much faster than the revenues are increasing. But we also want the country to address themselves to the refinancing risk. With refinancing risk, this is the possibility of having our debt, our public debt, rolled over, because maybe we cannot pay at that time, but at a higher interest, at a higher interest rate. And this is computed or assessed by computing the average time to maturity. So for the total public debt, we see that the average time to maturity has been declining, and a lower average time to maturity is not really desirable. We would want to see a longer average time to maturity, because if your debt is maturing in a shorter time, that is not good for us. So we see that this average time to maturity is actually declining from 9.6 years to 10.3 years between June 2020 and June 2021. And this was mainly because of a reduction again in the external debt average time to maturity from 12.9 years in June 2020 to 11 years as at June 2021. So as government continues to take on less concessional debt, that is both externally and domestically, and this less concessional the concession is usually characterized by the longer repayment periods, friendlier interest rates. We see government continuing to take on more debt on non-concessional terms, which is of course more expensive, with shorter times for maturity and repayment. As for instance, we see that concessional debt has decreased over the years from 74% in June 2017 to about 58% in December 2021. That's just a period of about 4 years. while on the other hand, we see the non-concessional or commercial debt increasing from 11% to about 24% over the same period. So what are we telling government? We see that we are reminding government that they committed to contract more loans on concessional terms, and the Minister for Finance came out at some point and clearly stated that. So we want government to implement their strategy on contracting debt on longer term maturity while reducing the reducing external borrowing on non-concessional terms. We also see another risk as government continues to borrow. We want them to address their mind to the interest rate risk. Uganda's external debt is predominantly fixed rate debt, which is ideally a good thing. We see our fixed rate debt at 68.4%. Yeah? This implies that our debt portfolio is still less vulnerable to the interest rate risk volatility. As an example, our fixed rate debt has, as at June 2019, was at 88.6%, but it came reducing to 75.9% in 2020, and then to 74% in 21, and now in June of 2022, we see that we have further gone down to 68.4%. The variable interest debt, yeah, which is also on floating. That means your interest rate is not fixed. It changes depending on the global economic conditions and the factors, right? So this variable interest debt, we see it now growing instead, yeah, from 9.3% in June of 2019 through the years to now in June 2022, we see it at about 21.5%. There's also no interest rate. The debt that we acquire at no interest rate is also growing from 2% in 2019 to 10% in 2020. Now, our concern, though, is that the average time, external average time to refixing, which is basically a measure for the average length it takes for interest rates to be reset, keeps changing, yeah? The longer the period, the lower the interest rate exposure. So we see that for Uganda, our average time to refixing reduced from 9.5 years in December 2020 to 8.8 years as at December 2021. Why is it not good for us? Because in the current environment where the interest rates are going up, even on the global market, you have the wars, you have the COVID pandemic, you have inflation. So if they have to revise the interest rate periodically, that means it will definitely keep going up. So that means our interest rates will also go up and we'll have to pay higher. That is why it is not good for us. This results into higher debt service costs, and yet we also see that the proportion of variable interest debt, as has earlier been explained, keeps on growing from 9.3 in 2019 to 21.5 in 2020. So what are we telling government? We are telling them to opt to maintain the concessional debt on concessional terms, which usually has a fixed rate, interest rate, so that even if you have this the volatility on the market, you're not really exposed to the interest rate risk. And we also want government, of course, to issue longer term securities as opposed to the shorter term securities.
The other element we are concerned about is the issue that debt that is not included in the computation of the total public debt. We have, for example, guarantees. The report on public debt, grants, guarantees, and other financial liabilities for the financial year 2021-22 highlights that a total of 7 guarantees amounting to US dollars 55.1 million were registered as active by the end of December 2021. These comprised mainly 2 entities, that is Uganda Development Bank Limited and Islamic University, IUIU, Islamic University in Uganda. Those are the prominent ones among the 7. The total disbursed and outstanding guaranteed stock stood at 26.9 million US dollars as at the end of December 2021. Despite the increase in the current exposure of government to disbursed and outstanding guaranteed debt from 28.3 US dollars, 28.3 million US dollars at the end of December 2020 to 26.9 million US dollars as at the end of December 2021, government is at a risk of paying guaranteed debt in the event guarantees fail to pay. For instance, outstanding debt service to the 2 entities, that is IUIU and UDBL, it increased by 0.28 million US dollars from 0.14 million US dollars as at the end of 2020 to 0.42 million US dollars as at the end of December 2021. So the increment in exposure is attributed to non-payment or by IUIU, which represents a big portion, and it represents what government will pay because it has guaranteed IUIU. So we are saying that you shouldn't guarantee someone whom you are not very sure they will pay, otherwise you will be liable. And in this case, government of Uganda having guaranteed the entities will definitely be liable, and they themselves are not making good on the expectation to pay. And we are noting that excluding this liability is portraying a more positive picture than what is actually the reality. Then the other element that is sometimes left out of the computation is the issue of domestic arrears. The total stock of domestic arrears increased from 4,144 billion Uganda shillings, that is in FY 2019 to 2020, to 4,692 billion Uganda shillings in FY 2020-2021. This represents an increment of 12% in the total stock of domestic arrears as of June 2021. So we would like to credit government for developing a strategy. At least it has made some improvement because it recognizes this as an issue, and the strategy has been to clear and prevent domestic arrears, because this one also, in a way, it even eats into, for example, what the local businesses would have been interested in borrowing, but at the same time, also the domestic arrears, the investors who are, for example, owed to government, their businesses are affected in terms of either like the outturn monthly and other things. So the move is anticipated to contribute to reduction of government debt while also improving business operations. So our recommendations in these 2 areas, which have been left out in the computation, 1, we are recommending that governments should follow up with guarantees that have outstanding loan balances to ensure that they pay timely. That is the 2, UDB and IUIU. And then on the issue of domestic arrears, government should sustain that strategy, and it should be clear. It should clear the domestic arrears accumulated as at end of July, so that they can avoid inconveniences, 1, of being dragged to court by the creditors, but also, even if they are not taking that in legal action, still it's bad for business, because most of the people who are owed, or the companies which are owed, are in Uganda, and as such it affects the local economy.
It's the issue of debt, because if you are borrowing this money and much of it is being swindled and is being stolen, it is not being put to the actual use, then you are going to keep borrowing and we shall keep paying, and we shall still have the same challenge of debt still with us. And we have seen this in several instances, including inflated contracts that are doubled or triple the amount that they should be, unutilized loans, like my colleagues have said, and absorption of loans and unfair loan conditions. And we have been seeing this. I mean, they've been reported about severally in the media and in other platforms. So we really must address the problem of corruption if we are to address debt. Because as a country, we are losing 10 trillion every year to corruption, according to the Inspectorate of Government. And our national debt is at 80 trillion. If we can recover the money we are losing in 8 years, we can pay back our national debt. As simple as that. But at the current trend we are moving at, it's not yet possible. And if we really don't address corruption, the 80 trillion next year will be probably 90. It will be increasing. It's not going down, it's increasing. So as we commemorate the International Anti-Corruption Day, of course, we are still in the commemoration, and the theme has been about citizens owning up the war against corruption. There are still some challenges. One is that we are not doing enough in terms of recovery of the money that we are losing. We are losing 10 trillion every year. We are recovering about 30 billion, 25 to 30 billion. That is not even 1% of the money we are losing. We are not doing quite well in that regard. And we call upon government to really pass the proceeds of crime bill. If we are to be effective at fighting corruption, we need to take away the proceeds of corruption. We need to recover the money from the thieves. And we are not doing well. We are losing 10 trillion each and every year and recovering only 30 billion. It's not even 1%. So we need, government should put more effort in recovery of the money we are losing. And I think the starting point should be passing the proceeds of crime bill, which is still in drafting. The other aspect is for protection, because we want citizens to be involved in the fight against corruption, but we don't have sufficient mechanisms for protecting them. So we call upon government to pass the witness protection bill, to have a witness protection law in place to protect witnesses and whistleblowers. They have talked about losing a lot of money through payroll management. We are seeing the issue of ghost workers coming up again. We are seeing people who have retired still on the payroll. We are seeing overpayment of salaries, and in some instances in billions. Someone is supposed to earn $1 million, they are receiving 10 million, and then there is a way of sharing. So we are seeing issues that we had addressed as a country coming up, and this is a cause of concern. And as a country, I think we should fully embrace digitalization, and with digitalization, we should have red flags. If a teacher has a particular skill and what they are supposed to be earning is well known, then if there is an attempt to make an overpayment, the system should be able to alert, not waiting for the auditor general to go and do a kind of post-mortem in instances where by that time we have already lost the money, and we are losing a lot of money in payroll management. So I want to conclude by, of course, calling upon all Ugandans to join the fight against corruption, to do what they can do within their means. If it is reporting, let them report. If it is not paying bribes, let them not pay bribes. If it is supporting the anti-corruption agencies, let them support. But let us do a thing or two to fight corruption in this country.
The domestic borrowing to escalate.